Good evening all, and welcome. The ocean is a terrifying place. Be sure to respect it while within its waters, or it might just swallow you up, never to be seen again. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories every night. But for now, it's time to get comfortable as we explore the depths of the ocean blue and let the darkness take control. My story takes place nearly 2 years ago, about 5 miles off the coast of Ozette, Washington. Me and my dive partner at the time, Jay, were both certified rescue divers with multiple advanced specialities, as well as soon-to-be dive masters, through the International PADI program. I should preface, I was 23 years old at the time while Jay was 24. The spot we chose was known by a few locals as a relatively uncharted piece of reef along a steep ravine with strong currents and very cold waters. I was also told that there were many semi-cavernous areas that were pristine for incredible underwater photography, all of which sounded incredible to Jay and I. For those divers listening, Jay and I were both certified cavern divers, deep water divers, and digital underwater photographer divers, so we had a very good idea of what we were doing. After beginning our dive and slowly making our way deeper into the relatively clear water, we came to a point around 40 to 50 meters where, if you didn't have the proper enriched oxygen mixture within your air tanks, it can result in such significant difficulties, including nitrogen narcosis, referred to as the bends. Now, narcosis can affect people differently. It can manifest as drunkenness, disorientation, or the worst, panic. Jay and I had been beyond this point of 40 to 50 meters many times before and had always packed the right air tanks and equipment necessary to have a successful dive. However, this one was different. We had planned to start our ascent when our cookies, the air pressure gauges, read 1000 psi, 800 for going up, 100 to decompress, and another 100 just in case anything happened. Nearly 19 minutes in, we began to quickly approach the 1000 psi mark, and I went to signal Jay that it was time to go up. We always dive no more than 5 odd meters apart, and had underwater audio devices to alert each other if we needed to get the attention of the other. When I turned to signal Jay, he had somehow drifted downwards nearly 8 to 9 meters from the last time I checked his position 30 seconds ago. I buzzed my underwater audio device to get him to look at me, but he didn't look up. We were on the edge of a very deep ravine, and Jay and I typically end our dives at the same air pressure. So if I was nearing 1000 psi, he must have almost been there too. At this point I was more pissed than worried. He knew that staying within 5 meters was a must for diving with a partner, and breaking that rule is when bad situations can happen. So after a few more times buzzing, I took out my emergency flashlight. This son of a gun could shoot a beam a good 30 meters down with ease, so I was certain Jay would be able to see it. But it didn't. He didn't look up. Now I began to get worried. The beam of light was hitting the back of his head, his hands, his regulator. I even caught his cookie, which had a little reflector on it. Jay also began to act weird at this point, swimming hard down without controlling his bouncy for a few moments before freezing and gradually floating back up for a few meters. He did this a few times before I decided to descend down towards him. I got around 2 to 3 meters short of Jay before he spun around abruptly, with his eyes wide. He took out his regulator, smiled, and waved at me, and began to swim as hard as I've ever seen a human swim, straight down into the ravine, until I couldn't see him anymore. I was beyond words. I just sat there, looking into the darkness, beside myself with what the hell just happened. After a minute, I hesitantly beeped my underwater audio device a few times, trying to hold out some hope, before slowly beginning my ascent. I hadn't realized that I was panting and managed to suck 200 psi out of my tank without even realizing it. I knew that what I saw was real, and there was no way in hell I would put my own life in danger going after someone who was clearly going to die, if not dead already, with such little air. Upon safely resurfacing, I immediately started towards the boat, in a panic of course, after the severity of the situation hit me. Long story short, Jay hadn't packed the right oxygen tank and had experienced a severely delayed narcosis episode that resulted in him just answering the call of the abyss, as some guys call it. I was very close with him, and I had to run through hoops with the police and other investigators during the investigation of his death. They never claimed I murdered him, but they implied it multiple times during questioning. But following the retrieval and subsequent autopsy of his body, it was shown that the cause of death was directly linked to massive nitrogen toxicity. I've recounted this story many times, yet the nightmares still come. The one question I'll always have is, what was going through his mind when he took out his regulator and descended into the depths? This happened nearly 20 years ago. I don't remember how old I was, but probably between 5 or 6. We used to live in a city right next to the ocean, and this happened in Germany. During the summer, my family would go to the beach to enjoy ourselves, and me and my best friend Jonas were just exploring the area around the beach and being little kids. There was this huge bush that you could go into. It might sound strange, but try to imagine a bush about 20 to 30 feet high, thick sides and hollow on the inside so kids could always go in there and play. Me and my friends went in there and were just joking around, fighting with branches and stuff like that. That's when we noticed a shadow outside the bush heading towards the entrance. Me and my friend didn't think anything of it and just kept playing. The shadow kept walking and eventually reached the opening. It was an old man in his 60s, and he was smiling at us, talking with us. We're basically trapped in the bush and start freaking out since we weren't supposed to talk to strangers, and here was this old guy trying to talk to us. He asks us stuff like where we're from and where our parents were, and that's when my friend lost it and booked it through the bush. That's when the guy's smile fades and changes to an angry face and he charges at me. I follow my friend's example and we run to get my parents. We told them what happened and they stopped allowing us to go back there. We kept going to the beach for a few weeks and I could always see the guy in the distance looking at me and my buddy. Fast forward a few weeks and there's a huge lifeguard building with toilets. My friend goes to pee and I go with him because I want to buy some ice cream. My friend goes to the restrooms, which are about 20 feet down the hall from the snack bar. I buy my ice cream and wait for him, and that's when I heard a scream. I run to the bathroom and rip open the door, and there is just one stall. The door is open, and the same old guy that had been stalking us is standing inside the stall door, and I can see my friend in the stall crying in the corner. That door behind me has shut. The guy sees me and starts yelling and looking like he's about to kill someone. I hurry to open the door and storm out to get help as I scream as loudly as I can, and a few lifeguards run over. I pointed at the door and they went in. They got the guy and the police were called. Me and my friend had to make statements, and my friend was in therapy for a few months but is alright now. Turns out the guy was a known child molester, but the police had no evidence to lock him up until then. This happened to me a few months ago, but when it first happened, given how crazy it was, it took me a few weeks to collect myself. It's relevant for me to tell you up front that I'm a military veteran, and I have PTSD and anxiety, as well as a pretty bad case of depression that I'm currently in my 3rd year of. I've read that cognitive behavioral therapy can massively improve PTSD symptoms and in turn help to reduce anxiety. So I've been trying various techniques at home. The problem is, my wife and I live in a small 2-bedroom ground floor flat with an upstairs neighbor with absolutely no concept of other people. A jock douchebag type who's a personal trainer. But he trains at home too, 'cause gains. The kind of guy whose only 2 topics of conversation are protein powder and steamed rice. I'm sure you can imagine the type. Anyway, with that being a constant issue, meditation and quiet mindfulness are just not possible with the constant noise. My solution to do this was to do my normal routine during the day, but take advantage of my insomnia later on at around 11 to midnight. I would put on my coat and my shoes as we live near the beach. I figured I could walk to the beach now that there's pretty much no people around, walk on the sand and be mindful to the sound of the ocean. Sounds nice, doesn't it? It was the first 2 times, but you know what they say, the 3rd time's the charm. I walked to the beach from my home. It isn't that far, maybe a little over a half mile. But once I got there, I would walk to the very end of the beach until you reached the cliffs where there is a World War II artillery gun turret, which was another half mile-ish. Sometimes I would walk the path up the cliff to the gun and stare out into the blackness of the midnight ocean, which was only broken by the occasional flash of light from the lighthouse. I would sit and listen to the waves crashing against the cliffs. Sometimes I would close my eyes and just concentrate on nothing but that sound. I felt safe there, knowing I was alone. Just me and the ocean. Usually, before I turned tail and head home, I would walk down to a small row of benches. They're all marked with plaques in remembrance to someone who came to enjoy the view in times past, although I imagine they came during the day. The benches are close to an old pub that was shut down years ago, and I'd heard the place used to get used as a dogging site or brothel or something back in the day. So when I saw vehicle headlights coming towards the pub, I figured it was some young lad trying to catch potential doggers at it. I sat on the bench and waited for the car to pass me. But as it rounded a bend in the road further up, I was momentarily lit up by the headlights. The headlights of the vehicle went off immediately, and the car went off-road and out of sight for a moment. At this point, I became fully alert and a bit cautious, so I dropped to one knee and ducked behind the bench that I had been sitting on. The vehicle drove past me. It was only maybe 40 feet from me, and as the lighthouse illuminated the vehicle, I could now see it was an old beat-up Land Rover kind of vehicle, with terrible camo painting on the wings. At that moment, someone popped out of the top of the vehicle with a scoped rifle and a big torch. In that instant in my head, I was back in Iraq, and my senses felt razor sharp. I dropped onto my belt buckle and crawled into a patch of long grass adjacent to the benches. Then, I got in a position where I could see them, but they couldn't see me. The guy with the rifle shone his torch at exactly the bench I had been sitting on, then the others, searching for me. He started looking all around him through the scope, looking for where I might have gone. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt as if they could hear it. I held my sleeve over my mouth to muffle the sound of my breathing, but more importantly to try and hide the condensation of my breath. The vehicle started to move to get a better view of the benches, so I began slowly crawling towards the main road, as not only is there a row of houses, but an old stone bus stop I could take hard cover in if they saw me and opened fire. After about 5 minutes of hiding in the long grass, it started to rain, and they were clearly still looking for me, but they were now about 150 feet away. The guy with the rifle was scanning around me with his eyes down the scope, so I waited till he was looking away from me to seize my moment and run for cover. I pushed my hands hard into the wet dirt to launch myself onto my feet, Then I sprinted towards the bus stop while throwing some zigzags in, just in case they had seen me. Luckily they hadn't, and I was now far enough away that I could take up my phone and call the police. They were there with a riot van and squad car in 10 minutes, and as I was talking to the officers in the van, they spotted the gunner's vehicle and took off after them. The officers in the squad car stayed behind to talk to me. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and they asked me if I was absolutely sure it was a rifle, and I told them I 100% was. No doubt in my mind at all. The officers both looked at each other, and then one of them asked, "And what exactly is your experience with firearms?" I told them I was ex-army and have seen my fair share of all kind of firearms. They then asked me what I was doing there after midnight, which is a pretty fair question to be honest. I explained that quite ironically I was taking a mindfulness walk to ease my PTSD symptoms. They were satisfied with that explanation, if not somewhat amused, and told me that the armed response unit was en route. I asked if I needed to stay behind and make a statement, but the officers told me not to bother waiting around, because they most likely wouldn't need to take a statement beyond the call I made, and also, it was absolutely pissing it down with rain, so I should get home and get dry. It was over, but I still felt super weird, and my heart was still thumping hard in my chest. I started the walk home, and then when I was about halfway there, a police helicopter buzzed overhead and settled over the area where I had been sitting on the benches, with the searchlight going. It was right then that it hit me like a shotgun to the chest. That happened. That was real, and it was here. My head started swimming, my heart was pounding twice as hard now, and my legs felt like jelly, and my lungs felt glitchy. I couldn't breathe properly. I dropped to my knees, crying in the street in the pouring rain, the only light coming from a nearby street lamp with a flickering bulb. I was gasping for breath, thoughts flashing in my head, thinking that if I had just stayed still, if I hadn't hunched behind the bench, if I had done any number of things differently, or hadn't, then I could have been gurgling my last breaths alone in the dark, wet and cold, and my wife would have been none the wiser until the following day. I have no idea if they were even there for me, and if they were, how could they know I'd be there? I'd been twice before. It's not like there are animals to hunt there beyond foxes. But why hunt foxes from a vehicle with a rifle and a torch at midnight? I'm not ashamed to say that the experience terrified me. I guess my army training helped me stay alert and stay hidden. But I don't know really. I don't go walking at nights anymore. I have the occasional nightmare about the whole thing. If you're wondering what happened to the guy, and I am too, I called on the phone and spoke to an officer. She was able to find the incident report right away. The officers on scene confirmed they'd seen the vehicle, and they had gone on an off-road pursuit. They said that they had given chase over difficult terrain for as long as they could, and then the vehicle turned off all the lights and made an escape using the dark as cover. The armed response unit was called and patrolled the entire area while the helicopter was dispatched in order to try and locate the vehicle with heat cameras. Both teams were unsuccessful in finding them, as by the time they had arrived on scene they'd gotten away. CCTV was also checked and yielded absolutely nothing. I told her I was sorry if they felt I'd wasted their time, and she told me that as far as they were concerned I did the right thing. She also said that there had been a few isolated accounts of gunshots having been heard in that area over the last few years, so maybe rethink taking my walk so late at night. I didn't have the energy to explain again why I used to wait until night to go walking, but any advice about avoiding getting shot is good advice, so instead, I just agreed and ended the call. After I'd hung up, I sat for a few minutes going over the whole thing in my head. If this has taught me anything, it's that being hypervigilant isn't always such a bad thing. This happened last year, between Christmas and New Year's Eve. I'm from the French Caribbean, so it's not unusual to scuba dive during the Christmas holidays. My family and I'm a 25-year-old female, booked a few dives. They're all really good scuba divers, better than me. They passed a few scuba diving levels that allowed them to participate in way more technical dives than I'm allowed to do. I enjoy scuba diving as well, and I'm able to do almost every casual dive, but don't feel safe diving without an instructor yet. Even more if it's a dive with decompression stops required. If anyone isn't familiar with scuba diving, here's a quick explanation. You can dive safely until a certain depth, before the pressure becomes dangerous. If you dive below that point, which is roughly 20 meters, you have to do decompression stops during your ascent, which means you have to stop while going up to the surface a certain time to let your body adapt itself to the pressure. If you ride up too quickly, you may catch decompression sickness, which can lead, in worst case scenarios, to death. So, we decided that I would manage a little private lesson with an instructor first, prior to more exciting dives with my family. So the first day my family was enjoying a dive on a technical spot that I wasn't feeling up to while I was alone with my instructor and retrieving my old scuba diving reflexes. Everything went okay. We were on a beautiful coral reef and there were many beginners on the boat, and I was by far the more experienced here. So my instructor, deciding that he could manage me with another student, which was a true beginner, and after a small briefing with all the safety regulations and hand signs, we began our descent. I quickly retrieved all my old reflexes and was enjoying myself, going back and forth to the instructor and the beginning diver during at least 20 minutes. Everything was pretty perfect besides one thing. It was a windy day and there was a heavy swell. It's less of a problem underwater. That was for surface swimmers. The only thing that it required was more physical effort to swim, and so my air bottle was emptying a little quicker than usual, which is normal. I had signed to my instructor that I was running thin of air, and he nodded. It was at this level far from being critical. It was at that moment that I saw a young man swimming towards me. It wasn't the instructor nor a student. In fact, I'd never seen him before, but he was in full scuba diving gear and we were the only dive boat on the spot, so I assumed he was with us, and I didn't pay attention to him on the boat or something. He was swimming fast towards me, and then signed me that he was out of air. When an air failure happens in scuba diving, there is a very strict procedure. You have to help the person, no questions asked, because every second is vital. If you faint underwater, you drown. On your gear, you have 2 breathing devices, regulator, octopus, and a main device and a spare device. So I handed the guy my spare breathing device, which means that we both were breathing on my gear, consuming twice as much air. I waited till the guy seemed calmed down and tried to hand sign him to see my instructor. He nodded a no and signed me to start our ascent. I understand this is the procedure, and I was a little low on air and above the decompression stop level, so the right thing to do was to go up to the surface before having an air failure. But I had to tell my instructor first. The guy was very reluctant, and it was strange because it would have taken us 30 seconds to tell the instructor, as he would have started an ascent with us. During this time I was panicking as I see my own air level going down. I saw that our instructor was staring at us quizzically and swimming towards us. It was at this moment that the guy let go of my spare air device and started swimming away, breathing again on his own device. I was totally lost and started my ascent with the instructor. Once at the surface, because of the tides, I was feeling dizzy and nauseous, so my bizarre encounter wasn't the first thing that I debriefed. It was after I calmed down and the boat was taking us towards the beach, without the strange guy, mind you, that I asked my instructor what happened. "Oh, I don't know, maybe a guy who lost his group and needed some time to calm down," I replied. "Okay, but why did he tell me that he was out of air?" My instructor told me I probably misunderstood the hand signal and that he was probably not telling me that he was having air failure, because he left breathing in his own device. I was sure I saw the air failure sign, but okay. The next day I joined my family during my dive, and the instructor was different. It was a girl this time. I had time to think about that guy and was worried about him, so I told everything that happened to Charlie, the instructor, and asked her if she knew the guy, and if he was okay because I hadn't seen him return to the surface. She asked me to describe him, which I did, and she said, "Oh, that's Marvin, don't worry about him, he's preparing himself to become a scuba instructor. Every time he has a day off from the restaurant he's working in, and he asked us to drive him on the local coral reef that morning and to pick him up in the afternoon. I ate at the restaurant earlier and saw him, don't worry." I was feeling relieved and told myself that it was just a comprehension issue with Marvin. The rest of the week were without incident. I was doing more and more technical dives and everything was going very smoothly. Charlie was a wonderful instructor. Never saw Marvin again, that being said, until the last dive. It was on New Year's Eve. We planned the best dive on that day. It was on a shipwreck, and I felt trained enough to try it without an instructor. Just my family and I. It was Charlie's day off. It was fairly deep for beginners, about 30 meters. And my first day male instructor was there and told us that he would be exploring the shipwreck too. So we would cross him and he would help me if he saw that I needed it. It was very comforting to know, and my family felt comforted too when I told them. So we began our descent and started swimming around the shipwreck. We crossed our old instructor twice, but every time I signed him that everything was fine. It was at that moment I saw Marvin swimming towards me. At that moment I was about 5 to 10 meters above the down point, still staying under my decompression stop level though. And I was a little surprised, and even more surprised when he signed me again that he was out of air. I was mistrustful, but if there was any chance that it would be true, I couldn't not help him, so I handed him my spare breather. This time I had a lot of air left, so I wasn't worried. He took it, began breathing, and took my arm. He reached to see the air level instrument, but he prevented me from seeing it. Then he signed me that we needed to start an ascent. I immediately signed no. I wasn't at my deepest when he reached, but I had been deeper during this time, and I had a decompression stop to do. I saw that my father saw us and he quickly looked away, probably not understanding what was going on. I tapped at my diving computer, a device which calculates when and how long to decompress, to signal to him, and he shrugged, smiled at me, and started swimming up, still holding on. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, and the thing that helped me react was that my diving computer was telling me to stop and decompress now. Then I understood that I was in danger, and that if I let him do what he wanted, I could die from the bends. I then started screaming, only to remember that no noise can be heard underwater, and started wriggling frantically, and I saw my father and sister way below me, my diving computer alerting me more and more intensely, and at that moment my father saw us and he reacted and swam very fast towards us. I managed to hit the guy as my dad grappled my ankle and suddenly dragged me deeper. The guy then quickly swam away. My dad dragged me deeper again, and then we waited for a very long decompression stop to ensure that I would be alright, then started heading towards the surface very slowly and cautiously. On the surface I started crying and went back to the boat. My father then told me he thought Marvin was my old instructor, and that's why he wasn't surprised at first. I then told it to my instructor, who took it more seriously this time and told me to show him Marvin when he would go up to the surface. Thing is, he never did. Next day on New Year we went a last time to the scuba diving club because my little sister had a diploma to collect, and we saw Charlie. Still shocked, I told her what happened with Marvin, and then she stiffed. She told me that Marvin was at the restaurant yesterday for New Year's Eve, and that he hadn't been scuba diving at all. Which means this guy wasn't Marvin, and to this day I still don't know who he is, or what he wanted, and why he literally tried to kill me twice. This happened a few years ago, and I had completely forgotten about it until about a month ago. So did my boyfriend, who was present at the time. It happened in July 2012. I'm off with my boyfriend on vacation. He inherited a small house on an island in Brittany in France called Ile-de-Gros, and it's situated a few kilometers off the south coast of Brittany, and you can only get there by ferry. It's pretty small and only a few inhabitants live there all year round, and there's not much to do, but it's quite beautiful and is a great place for a quiet vacation. We like to go for rides during daytime as well as nighttime. One night, on a clear night, doused in moonlight, we went around midnight for a ride on the island, as we were used to doing so. We headed to a beach that borders a family vacation village that is situated in a big curve bordered by a small road. Alongside the road is a strip of grass and sand. When standing on this strip, you have a really nice view of the beach and the sea which lie below. The road and village are situated on some kind of steep cliff. To go down to the beach, you have to walk down sheer narrow stairs situated a few meters away from where we were standing. Caleb, my boyfriend, and I were standing by the road on the strip of sand for like 10 minutes looking down at the sea. I need to point out that it was a calm, clear night and we hadn't seen anyone during our ride. We were walking along the beach for a while and hadn't noticed anything strange, nor signs of human presence on the beach, no night swimmers, and the water was very cold in Brittany, even in the summer. No young people having parties on there, etc. So we were standing on a cliff facing the sea, when suddenly straight ahead of us we saw a human-shaped figure get out of the water and hurry across the beach. I know it's nothing scary so far, except the figure was pitch black, contrasting with the clear sand, and was not reflecting any light, like a dark shadow. Remember, the moon was shining. We first thought it was someone skinny dipping. Problem is, when you're going out of the sea, you first swim to the edge of the sea, then you stand up and walk to the water. The figure gradually walked out, all the time standing tall, as if walking on the bottom of the sea. Moreover, Caleb and I had been looking at the water for a while and never noticed anyone swimming, as if it was totally submerged for at least 10 minutes. At the sight of it, I felt quite uncomfortable, not to say freaked out. So was my boyfriend, who doesn't scare easy. The weirdest part is once the human-shaped figure got out the water, it headed straight ahead to the foot of the cliff where we were standing, but it wasn't walking or running, it was sliding on the sand really fast. A pitch-black human shape, with an indistinguishable face and features sliding fast as hell on the sand, almost gliding, not moving its legs or anything, leaving no trail or footsteps behind. All the time standing tall and human-shaped. It was of average human size and build. We stared at it as silently until we got away a few meters from the foot of the cliff, then without talking decided to get the hell out of there, still with this feeling of dread and fear. We never saw or heard this creature again, and nothing strange happened during the rest of our stay. My boyfriend, however, has witnessed strange things on the island before, but nothing that's related to this. In 2016, I was camping in my troopy around the Daintree area in Australia. On the night of my 21st, my partner and I decided to go down to the beach, Thornton Beach, and smoke a joint, which I've since realised was probably dumb because of crocodiles. It's a fairly remote beach backing onto rainforest with a few buildings down the southern end. We were sitting up near the tree line in the shadows from the moonlight and having a chat, having a smoke, when we hear the sound of a twig breaking and leaves crunching. We both spin around and look behind us, walking back towards the beach. When we didn't see anything, we assumed it was just an animal or a bird and walked a few meters down the beach to carry on the night. About 5 seconds after sitting down, a man walks out of the rainforest from exactly where we were previously sitting and makes a beeline for the water. We weren't expecting to see another person, so we shuffle back up the beach for safety of the shallows. The man takes off his shirt and just starts to roll around in the shadows of the water. It's pretty strange, but each to their own. He does this for 5 minutes before he gets up, stands in the water, faces the ocean for another 5 minutes, then turns around. He's looking in our direction and takes a few steps forward, bends down and picks up what we assume was a coconut, which causes my partner to stiffen up a bit. He stands there with the coconut staring towards us for quite a while. We were sure he couldn't see us in the shadows, but we're starting to doubt it. I could sense my partner starting to gear up. He felt around for a big stick that was behind him and whispered that if he came close to us, we should run. After maybe 3 to 5 minutes, he drops the coconut, walks back up the beach, and we start to rise, and my partner grabs the stick, but the man walks straight past us and back into the rainforest. We booked it back down to the beach to the car and drove back to our campsite in Dewan, feeling pretty darn rattled. We came to the conclusion that maybe he was on ecstasy, overheated or dehydrated, so that's why he was rolling around in the water, or perhaps just enjoying a nice nighttime ocean dip on his own, crapped himself when he realized we were there, picked up a weapon in case, and then fled. In any case, let's not meet again, strange man. This happened years ago, when I was maybe 17. I'm 24 now. My family was on vacation and we were staying in a resort in Southern California on the beach. The resort had 2 buildings, one directly by the beach and one was across the street. We were staying in the building across the street. My cousin and sister and myself decided to go sit on the beach one night. It was probably 9 p.m. There were usually a few people out walking or playing around, but on this night there was no one, except for a few couples walking by randomly. We sat down on some towels and watched the water from a good distance. We were chatting and telling stories when we noticed a man walking around us, going to the water, back to the walkway leading up to the resorts, back and forth. He got closer and closer to us until he was so close he stopped on the edge of our towels. He was a big man with shaggy blonde hair. My sister suggested we go down to the water and he followed. At this point we knew he was following us, so we decided to leave. He started up the wooden walkway back to our building, and like I said, our building was across the street. To get to it, you had to pass through a little alleyway. The alley was well lit, and the street was relatively busy, but there was a parking garage adjacent to the alleyway. My head immediately told me not to walk past the parking garage. We were facing the alleyway, about to walk through. This guy is right behind us, and I loudly said, "Hey, wait, let me beat off my sandals." We stopped and took off our shoes and beat the sand out of them. The man passed us reluctantly, so close he was almost touching us. That's when I saw his eyes for the first time. He was definitely on something. His pupils looked messed up. His eyes were as wide as saucers. He passed us slowly and went, where? Directly into the parking garage. I knew he was waiting for us, so we ran. Over the wooden walkway and onto the beach, through the sand to the next walkway, which led up to another building's pool area, and he was behind us again, chasing us, running at full force. We got into the pool area and the man stopped. There was a woman cleaning and we told her what happened, and she got hotel security, and a police officer asked us some questions and walked us back to the building. I was scared by this experience for a while, and will not go to the beach at night again without my very large and tough fiancé by my side, ever. So beach creeper, let's not meet. Working on ships, there was one night I was on a ship sailing through Alaskan waters, and it happened to me my first night ever seeing the Northern Lights. I can't believe how awesome that was. Made the night look like it was dusk, and we were able to see clearly for miles. A few buddies and I hit the roof, or what we call the Lido deck, at 1 a.m. just to gaze at it. An hour or so in, there were 6 of us on top, nearly the entire crew. A big white spot then shines at us. We were near land, but where the spot was above the water, and it wasn't low enough to be a ship. This was very high up. It shined on us for 15 to 20 seconds, and once the light turned off, we looked to see what it was, but saw nothing. No trace of an aircraft or anything. A few minutes go by and the same light shined on us again. This time it was on the other side of our vessel, above mountains, still unable to see what it was. We all saw it. We have all never seen any aircrafts hovering above these waters, especially at 2 a.m. We don't know what it was. We think it might have been some sort of silenced aircraft the military were probably doing drills on or something. But anyway, that's one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to us in the ocean. On our drill ship that was built in China, we noticed on the drawings there was a room. We went to look at it and couldn't find an entrance, but the spacing was obviously there, and there was an extra room. It might not sound so creepy, unless you've been in these shipyards where two things are known to happen. Stowaways, although I doubt this was the case, but also hundreds of workers at any given time are told to blindly follow orders. You see, when you're building a ship, all projects are almost happening at the same time. It's not always a ground-up situation. People would be welding crane masts while others are under it, welding the floor beneath. There are literally hundreds of people all working on it at the same time. This room had no outer welds whatsoever, which means the welds are from the inside. The theory is that they all welded the different pieces together without realizing they weren't leaving themselves an opening, because they all have different jobs and typically don't collaborate. Because the room is sealed on all 6 sides, to our knowledge, I doubt it was all 6 sides at once. It would have been the last 2 sides and them thinking the other was leaving an opening. I hope that explains it. There's only one possibility that there's an opening between the room and the hull, because it does look sealed at the bottom and top due to the size of the ship. I can't rule out it absolutely went all that way to the hull just from looking at the deck above and below. The double bottom is inspected every so often by a third engineer. It's not a place people go because there's not much of a reason to. I've only been there just to see what it looks like. Never thought about connecting the two. But anyway, we confirmed the room had all 6 sides, yet not a single weld on the outside. There's only one way this could have happened, so I'm sure you're starting to get it now. They must have welded from inside the room and then realized they had no way out upon completion, if the gases didn't kill them first. It's extremely heavy around that room. People say they hear things, and I definitely have. This isn't some old ship either. I rode the ship from China to Amsterdam after completion and then the maiden voyage to America. I guess hauntings happen quickly. I've been fishing out in the Gulf of Mexico where they have some oil rigs. This rig wasn't being used from what we knew, so we got up pretty close to it to fish for red snapper. While we were out there, we could have sworn we heard the screams of a woman over and over. It was hard to explain. We thought it was just the wind making noises through the rig. Well, that's what we were told, but it creeped us the hell out. I work on North Sea oil rigs on an ad hoc basis off the coast of Scotland. You sometimes get some unsettling things. Fog can come rolling in out of nowhere, and other rigs you can see off the sides can disappear in front of your eyes. Sometimes you can't see the walkway 6 feet in front of you, or if you're walking over grating you can't see the sea below you, which is about 60 meters down from deck to sea, but you can hear it all be muffled. The fog can roll in over the course of a few minutes too, so a perfectly clear day can become pea soup. You can also feel the rig moving and swaying on high winds and rough seas. Even though it's a fixed leg platform, it's very unnerving to feel your office swaying when it shouldn't be. My last trip was my first ever night shift, and I found it particularly unsettling, as you've got the background noise of the plant, but I walked around the whole rig without seeing another living soul for my whole shift. Usually there are 130 people on board, although smaller rigs have smaller head counts. Usually once a trip, I'm hit by this awareness that you're very isolated and in the middle of nowhere. Most rigs I've worked on are an hour chopper rides from land, so if something goes wrong, it can escalate very quickly. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you enjoyed tonight's stories. Some of you will probably say we haven't had this topic in a long time, and the truth is we have not. Finding half-decent ocean stories really is no easy feat. I mean, I'm very fortunate to find the ones I did. I think people just don't go to the ocean anymore, or perhaps it's too terrifying to go in the first place. In any case, if anyone has any more ocean-y kind of stories, those would be really cool. Send them over to me. I'd love to read them. Maybe we can do this one without a year break. It might even be 2 years. It's been so long since I've done it. In any case, if you enjoyed tonight's video, be sure to let me know. And if you're new here or haven't subscribed for whatever reason, be sure to do that because that's really, really cool. Subscribe, hit the bell icon, and come back every night for new horror stories. Every night. It's a daily show. You might have got this by now. Huge thanks to my lovely members and patrons for all their help and support and contributions. That really does make a difference towards help keep the channel running, and I love you all so very much. Thanks guys. Names are on screen. Links to how you can, get involved in the description. Yeah, all is good. The secret project I was working on, if you guys heard the interview, I've got a one that I haven't disclosed exactly what it is just yet. I got a prototype made, and after 9 days of not hearing from the company, they emailed me and were like, hey, we never received your files. And so I checked and I'd uploaded them to their server, and I was like, actually I have. And then they're like, oh, we're so sorry, we're gonna send it to you now, express. So it's a bit of a nuisance because I really wanted this prototype soon, but I suppose I'm not going to get it. It's estimated to arrive in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, it's so long to wait. Oh, wow. It is what it is. So I'm hoping if the prototype is good, we can move on to the next phase, the next step, which is approving it and then making it. And then, you guys hopefully wanting it. Yes, all very ambiguous, but this should be cleared up, once it's made and if it's worthy. Anyway, I'm going to leave you with the mystery. Oh, you can watch another one of my videos. Look, why don't you pick one of those two? Or if not, you might be asleep. So stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.